Real Estate Rewired.
Welcome to Real Estate Rewired with Gus Waite, AI with a Heart. This is a show where we're interviewing 100 people in the real estate space, the top 1%, to figure out what they're doing, what they're not doing, what's working, what's not working, what they love. And this is our second shot at this, Stephanie, and I want to introduce this guest. I am so excited to get her back on. She is a true titan of industry. She directed a multi-billion-dollar portfolio of commercial real estate developments. She built a marketing empire with the Audrey Group, which scaled to 8 offices and handled over $250 million in capitalized billings with some giants like Bank of America. She's also a doctorate in business administration and a Juris Doctor, and currently is the visionary behind the Blue Diamond Group and the Xenoverse Wellness Group, where she is pioneering global social impact initiatives, and she's doing it all with heart. Stephanie, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
Gus, I'm excited. And I'm so excited to know, as you shared, that we are in the year of the horse, because I could say I feel just like that, ready to go.
Do you feel like you're ready to gallop ahead?
Oh, ready to gallop ahead. Yes. Full speed ahead. Yes.
Yeah. So listen, let's start with that. I mean, we'll go back and get into the beginning because that was an origin story. But let's talk about today, right now. What are you galloping ahead to? What have you created? What's happening?
So I had this big vision around creating global wellness resorts where people could heal mind, body, and souls. And I thought about it because it really came after going through my own personal, if you will, dead end in the road, fork in the road where, you only have 2 choices. And the first time that I found myself at that place was at the passing of my mom. And at the time she was 48. And I remember I had just turned 30. And people had said, when you turn 30, all these things can happen in your life. And so sure enough, true to form, I turned 30 the end of August, and January, the end of January, my mom dies. And, it's one thing if someone has an illness, so you kind of have some type of heads up or warning. So I didn't have any warning. She literally took a nap and had a brain aneurysm and didn't wake up. So being the only child and, next of kin, unfortunately she wasn't married. So I had to do the double duty of coming home to claim her body from the morgue because she was found dead in the house by herself. And, those are kind of things that you can't unsee. And so for me, just having that last image not being the one that I wanted to hold on to, but of her body on that table in the morgue, and just the devastation mentally that I had no idea how to prepare for, but more importantly, how to recover from. And so along the journey, what I realized is that it took mindset, and it took a strong constitution. It was at a time that I didn't think that I was strong. And I sort of say that God and I, we seem to have these chapter conversations where I feel like I'm working on a particular part of my character development. And so then I'm presented with all of the experiences that allow for that development to happen. But it made me aware of 2 things. I don't know if you recall this. There's this poem that's called Footprints. And there's a set of footprints on the sand, and the person is asking God, there's times that I see 2 sets of footprints, but then there seems like during my hardest times, I only see 1 set. Why do you leave me when I'm at my point of despair? And, God is like, no, child. I didn't leave you, I'm carrying you. And so just kind of having that reflection, like as much as I wanted to fall apart, I knew I couldn't fall apart, but I'd fallen apart internally.
Mm-hmm. See, I heard recently, and I love this, that God's first language is silence. And so the imagery I have, and this is like, listen, this happens to all of us, right? I mean, in life, what I find is life is a series of it comes together and it falls apart, right? There's a marriage and then there's a divorce. There's the healthy kid, the sick kid. There's the parent and the death of the parent. There's success in business and failure in business. And that's the nature of life. And what I hear you saying, and this is what I love, is when you're in that space where in essence the canvas is blank. And what are you going to create from that experience of seeing your mother in that state? And there's really two ways to go, right? One way is down that dark, negative path. And the other way is to use it as fuel to create something authentic that comes from your heart.
Absolutely. And I chose the latter. I chose that I was going to pick up the mantle of her life and I was going to take from it the inspiration that I had, and I was going to make it mine and further, develop it and take it to, if you will, my wildest dreams. And so that's where the transition happened. Is she was the one who had been in real estate, not me. I was in advertising. I was a brilliant strategist solving business problems for, Fortune 500 global companies. And I loved that for a while. And then I realized that I didn't like the process of doing business any longer because there was so much and continues to be intellectual theft. And when you're dealing with bigger organizations, what I discovered is I spent way more time having to litigate our contracts than actually at times being able to do the brilliant work that I had assembled this brilliant team, of top talent to be able to execute on. And so that's kind of where you also see the JD in my history. My father's mother, I didn't know at the time, was one of the first Black women lawyers licensed in the state of California. She didn't practice very long or didn't practice at all. I don't know which it is. I only knew her as a teacher because she had become either disgusted or disillusioned by the industry. But at 6 and a 7-year-old, I was reading legal code books. That's funny. My mom's mother had in her library, and she was the one that didn't get past a 3rd grade education. And so there's just this real interesting, kind of narrative about my journey. But it was my mom's mother that when my mother conceived me at 18 during her senior year of high school, my grandmother insisted that I was great and that I was special and that I needed to be born in this private hospital because there was going to be a movie made about my life. And so, you kind of go back and forth between now I'm able to look back because I've lived enough of the journey to go back and see some of the patterns that when you're in the middle of the patterns, you don't know unless it is you begin to develop that strong insight, that ability to be in silence and to hear the guidance, because otherwise the noise of the world is too loud for you to really hear it.
Well, and it's really interesting because I in my own experience working for firms that were owned by private equity and that whole world of noise that you're talking about and the theft of the intellectual property and the reality that you're in this sort of weird battle where you're not creating what it is that you want to create, what you love to create. And so then you pivoted to now after the marketing, where was the first pivot to saying, hey, this is what I want to create? What was that and how did you do that?
Thank you. That's a very good story because it ties into why I'm here in Jamaica now 30 years later. It was right around that time that I had met colleagues who I had begun to explore real estate development because I had been advising the National Conference of Black Mayors, and these were mayors of cities across the U.S. And I found that after I would come up with like a strategy for a community, then the developers would come in and make money, and I couldn't understand, well, how do they get paid? Because it seems like I should be able to get paid in this process as well. And so I met these guys, and they did the Hyatts. And so he knew that I wanted to kind of see how I could transition from advertising into real estate developments, but I really didn't, kind of have a clear path. So he says, hey, we're doing a Hyatt in Jamaica. And at that point, I'd never been to Jamaica. I have no Jamaican relatives. So, and I also was not a very adventurous person, that I was adventurous in my real estate, in my business development and acumen, but in terms of just me as a single woman, jump on a flight, sight unseen and go and navigate, that wasn't, kind of ready or hadn't fully developed yet, because now say less. Where am I going?
Right.
Out. But at that point, I wasn't her. But that was what planted the seed of Jamaica. And so I came to Jamaica for the first time about 25 years ago. So it took about 5 years before I arrived. And maybe it was less than that, maybe about three years. Because at that point, let me see, I had a son a year following my mom's passing. So he was about 3 or 4. So yeah, about 5 years ago, 25 years ago, I came to Jamaica with this group. And so it allowed me to be on my own, but part of a group. So I experienced, and I remember going out on the glass bottom boat and looking back at the island. I visited Negril, Montego Bay, and we stayed in Negril. And I remember God speaking to me because I looked back and I saw these beautiful resorts, which I would have been a, contributor to one of them being developed. But what was so heartbreaking when I saw the community around, the island, I thought, oh my God, I would have been like them. We build a beautiful resort, hire 5 people locally, and then close out all of the tourisms from supporting these local, communities. And I just said, there's just no way. I can't. I don't agree with that philosophy. I won't do it. And so I remember praying just to God, like, man, if I had a chance, I would do something different. I didn't realize that the answer to that statement was yes. You have been assigned to do something different. So anyway, I leave there thinking that I'm going to buy an island and I'm going to develop the island from scratch. So that's kind of all I was thinking about from the island perspective. Years before, when I owned the advertising agency, I was a regular guest of the leaders in the Bahamas. So that's when I was really on this. I'm going to buy an island, develop it from scratch. So I'm going to develop the acumen to be able to facilitate that development. So that was my big takeaway. Yeah.
Well, I love that. So there's a couple of different things that are popping through my mind, right? The visionary piece, that's where there's no physical resistance, right? In other words, the dream and seeing where it's going to go. And in my mind, I see it. It's then trusting that and then as it comes down into the sort of physical plane, there's obstacles, there's objections, there's financing, there's people, there's weather, there's traffic, there's all kinds of obstacles in the physical world where it gets very thick. And what I'm curious, because in our last conversation, my experience is the people who can really master the process, keep the vision up here, but recognize like the process starts with like literally, what am I doing when I get up at 8:00 this morning? How do I not get drawn into low impact activities and really focus on the high impact activities to manifest this quicker? How is that process for you? Is that a clear question? I don't know if I are.
It's spot on. I know exactly what you're talking about, and that's the journey, and that's the part that most people struggle with, and that's where when you've heard phrases like, I'm in my own way, it is. If you get too caught up in the process and you lose sight of the vision, which means you must be very disciplined, and this is why people say. I was always very critical, which I know you are. We share a birth sign. And so we see things oftentimes that others don't necessarily see. They don't always appreciate the fact that we see it because we tend to point it out. And not everyone is interested in the growth to the degree that we are. We're not pointing it out because we want to tear you down. We're pointing out because actually we see an opportunity for a solution usually. Yes. We don't go around just telling people stuff for nothing. But anyway, right. So in this same thing, if I look at my journey, 2 things have happened. Because I always recognize if I hit resistance in some place, and especially when the resistance doesn't make sense. Like I started, the business long before it became the $250 million joint venture. It started off in my mother's garage in East Oakland. And my first client was part of the House of Secrets. And the first brand that I represented was the Seagram's brand. And this guy was like an angel sent to give me my first Fortune 500 contract from New York, because what he did is he knew that I still lived in my mother's garage, and then I moved into my first studio apartment, so that's where my first office was. But he came to meet with me in my studio apartment, which was set up, mostly like an office. And he knew that I was going to be moving in probably another 60 days into my first office, right? And so he knew that the folks in New York wouldn't have necessarily approved the contract. They weren't going to come and meet me in my studio apartment. And so, but he timed it so that by the time they needed to kind of validate the contract, I was now placed in my new office. And so it worked like, charm and time. And so it's just amazing when I look back along the journey. And it's the thing is that I acknowledged and expressed gratitude for all of those angels real time, because I also had experienced so much resistance and so many people who were haters and wanted to tear me down. There were grown people who were like old enough to be my parents. They thieved my money. They thieved, they just did all kinds of things that I didn't even expect, because again, I still came from that era where I was raised to respect adults and respect your elders, and everybody was my elder.
I hear that. And, it's so interesting to me because, we talk about this, the 3E framework that we talked about previously, which was education, experience, and examples.
Yes.
And this is where the faith comes in, right? Because you have a vision. Then it gets into the physical world, and there's people who are trying to steal your ideas, and you run into this angel who is hanging out in your studio and goes, God, the execs will never give her the contract if they come to her house, so let's wait until she's in the office. But every day, and I guess this is what I'm curious to Stephanie, is when you mentally use that blank, what do I do next? That's okay. My mom has come down here a couple of times and interrupted in the middle of the podcast. So don't worry about it. But so when you hit those sort of blanks, right, where you're like, God, you don't know what to do next. How do you spiritually reset to decide what the next right action is?
So that's the thing, is it's so important to find those spaces of silence where you're able to be quiet. And so a lot of times I think that that's also what was unique about being an only child, at least for the first 9 years of my life. My mom and I, we did raise another family member. So I got an opportunity to be a big sister or auntie, if you will, as well. But I was my mother and father's only child, and so in the relationship, that allowed me to have a unique relationship with each one of them. And that also allowed me to have quiet time where I was used to spending time. I played business as a young person in my room in between my violin lessons, my piano, lessons, dance lessons, and everything else that I did, as well as, my fierce focus on academic performance, all of those things. I was just very much into global business. I remember being in elementary school, one of my teachers attempting to punish me by having me read about Hiroshima. And instead, I was inspired, because I was inspired about how a people rebuilds after devastation. And so it didn't matter what they tried to throw at me in the negative. It was like I had this strong, strong connection with God. And in fact, here's the thing. Along the journey, when you get busier and busier, is when you find the disconnect. And so there were points too where I was disconnected to a degree, but never completely.
So talk more about that.
Yeah, so it because I always felt that I was on this bigger journey, and I would say that my mind sort of works like an engineer. And so once it is that you've defined that end destination, then I reverse engineer most everything. right? And so I sort of do the same thing, and this may be bad. This might be why I'm single now. But even with dating, I literally do a pros and cons assessment. And kind of calculate, pros and cons, and but the problem is that people don't tell the truth. And that's the same thing with computers and everything else, and that's the same thing with the process. Junk in will not produce the outcome that you want.
Well,
So mental junk.
yes, absolutely. Well, and here's as we're talking, it just occurred to me, right? And this is, I think this is going to be an interesting question. You'll appreciate this. So let's say 100 years ago, if you were quote unquote ambitious, and I mean, leaving out all the economic and racial and, let's like historically leave all that stuff out just for the argument's sake.
Okay.
And you wanted to start a business. Your sphere was maybe you wanted to open a hardware store downtown, or you wanted to start a local business in your local community. That was thinking big, right? If you were going to move from being a seamstress to owning a dress shop, that required an expansion of what you thought was possible, especially in your situation with African-American women at that time in history, right? So there was there was an expansiveness that had to happen. And then,
But see the thing. Okay, get your question out. Get your question out.
And right. And then, but now what I'm thinking with AI and the ability to utilize that on a global level, the ability to have an effect worldwide is really closer now than it's been at any time in history. How do you expand the mindset to embrace that possibility like you're doing? How, right? You kind of see where I'm going with this? Like the tools
Absolutely.
that you now have are so phenomenal. How do you sort of structure all of that in your brain and your workday?
So, Gus, here's where you're missing it. We were all created for a purpose and assignment. I'm the first generation of Gen Xers. So we were the first generation of the new technology. I watched Steve Jobs build in his, not watch personally, but my mentor was one of his key executives, one of my mentors at that time, when he was just forming, right? And so I lived vicariously through Apple becoming Apple. Meanwhile, I watched China rebuild to become China from doing the dirty work of all the manufacturing. So I had this because remember, it was at 9 that during playing business one day, I decided that my business needed credit cards. I don't know if I shared the story, but I used to play business. I would spend hours playing business. So my dolls were my customers. I knew 10 key before I knew what that meant. I just had this calculator. I had the Monopoly money. And I had any real estate forms or any forms that I could get a hold of that made my mom had left behind. She had a Mary Kay business, so I had those forms too. But we had gone out to the mall and I noticed that all of the stores had credit cards. So I grabbed the credit card applications so I could see their logos. I'm not so artistic. My mom was the illustrator, the artist, but I could carefully copy them. So I took index cards when I got home and I copied each logo on an index card. And then I was like, that's still not it. So I scoured the house and found my mother's photo album refills. And I perfectly cut one to fit each index card. And then I took a straight pen and I pinpricked every letter and number so that when I put a paper and a pencil, I could get an imprint. Again, I'm aging myself because that's how we used to complete credit card transactions, right? And right when I was so proud because I made all 6 or 8 of my cards, my mother comes into my room and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, uh-oh, think fast because the wrong response can produce the wrong outcome, right? And I was notorious for I didn't like getting in trouble, and I especially didn't like to get a whooping. So if I thought that was going to happen, I would run. So I'd already kind of calculated if I could run from where I was, and I couldn't. I was a bit trapped in my room. So now I had to talk my way out of it. And this is why they were like, I was a born attorney because, or somebody, because I was always talking my way out. But right then I said, "Mom, I know who I'm going to be. And so she kind of, lets out this, nervous laugh, like, who? Because, in her mind, she's like, counterfeiter? Like, who is this my 9-year-old daughter going to be? And I said, Mom, I see it. I'm in the boardroom. I'm wearing a navy blue pinstripe suit. Everybody's paying attention to me. I'm going to be an international business tycoon. Going to be a deal maker. And then the wealthiest man in the world at the time was from Saudi Arabia, and he was a deal maker. And I knew about this. And, sometimes I wonder, why was I interested in, but these were the things that I read. These were the things that captured my attention. I was interested in global business and global business affairs. I was interested in technology. One summer, just for fun, just because I could, I had been attending UC Berkeley from the time that I was 9. So with 15, I did microcomputer electronics just for a summer to learn to build computers. And, I looked around the room and said, don't want to hang out with these guys, stinky guys that don't believe in a bath, like not my group. I have more personality than them, but I'll use my same tech brain that they have. And I'll incorporate that into the business systems and the business solutions that I provide. So what you'll find is that has been a big part of my secret sauce, is that I've had the natural math science orientation, the typical kind of engineer thinking. And then because my mother was an artist and writer, she gave me that, where the school tried to say, you're going to be either or. She says, no, you're going to be and. And so I had the ability to build and, but also every skill that I have leaned into to develop was necessary. I was born with it for the assignment that I have been given. So it's about being in alignment with that and knowing that you're aligned.
I mean, and that's, now you're speaking my language, because it's really interesting, right? Like, some people are interested in horses. They just love horses. They love everything about horses. It is kind of interesting. We all arrive with a preset of interests. If we're fortunate, like you were, we're in a family, in a society, in alignment with, witnessing, wow, that's what you're interested in. Let me support.
No, wrong.
Okay,
Wrong. No, it's not that. It's, you're weird. Something's wrong with you. You're stupid. You're going to fail. You are focusing on the wrong thing. You should just be focusing on a guy. You go to college to meet a guy so you could get a husband. Oh, but you're too dark, so you're not going to be picked first. So you better know how to do something else, because the guys are going to pick the lighter skinned Black women first. The darker skinned Black women don't have an option. The companies that I led, we're not sure exactly how you got here, but you've impacted us so much, we don't really want to let you go. we wouldn't have picked you fairly, but somehow or another you got through somehow. But dang, what you've done is, nobody can deny it. We've all tried to steal it and take credit for it. And that's why I kept a spreadsheet, because remember, I was building D-based systems way back when. So I was already oriented towards tracking my own outcomes for myself, because I would never get credit for it. I was always underpaid. I was always the last hired, the first fired. Every executive position that I was hired into suddenly became an administrative position after I was hired into the position.
So let me back it up then. And I hear what you're saying. I'm thinking about your grandmother, and I'm thinking about...
He was the one who told me when I left for LA that I was stupid and I was going to fail.
All right. So at some point, somebody, or there was some seed planted in you that gave you the self-confidence to authentically be yourself. Or is that not true?
It's been a journey. And that's what it is, if the impetus behind the wellness resorts is that I believe that there is a community of us that it wasn't so much safe spaces that we occupied. It was nothing but a connection with God. And every time we felt lost, is getting back to that connection with God and just saying, all right, it was one time where I remember finally, after I was devastated again with disappointment, I just received a glowing review in terms of my performance. And I thought I was finally at home in an organization that had thought leadership baked in. And, I was just elated about what I was going to be able to contribute. But on my first day of the job, there was another female that worked for the company, happened to be Caucasian. And when I was being introduced around to the team that was going to be working, she assumed, I guess, that I was her assistant. And so she says to me, "Oh, go put your things over there." And of course, I didn't correct her or anything because I'm an executive. I have an office. So later, when she realized that I was an executive, several levels above her, she became disgruntled. And so we had a policy where, with some of the thought leadership, that if you were having problems with an executive, you could call them out in this forum and have the moderator kind of ream them to break them down, to apologize to you. So this is within my first week on the job. 4 days later, she has me called out. And what she doesn't know, though, I've done a master's in organizational management with an emphasis on leadership. So not only do I know what these people are doing, I know how and what they should be doing, but nobody considers that. So she calls me out. The lady moderating, another Caucasian woman, just reams me because she starts crying. And I'm like, what is she crying? Like, she's crying. I've done her so right. I'm trying to figure out what the hell is she on? Like, what have I done to this lady, right? Well, long story short, she never is satisfied with me in my role. And so she starts dating a guy who is on my level in terms of our positions, but I'm above him because I had more experience, more backgrounds, more credentials. So I made more than him. And he had a problem with that. So they started being together. Anyway, came up to a day where she just couldn't take it anymore. After I get this glowing review, I closed on a house purchase and they fired me. No reason, no nothing. I came into work, my office is I'm being thrown out on the streets, like I had done something wrong for the organization. And so it was at that moment that I asked God, I said, you made a mistake. I don't know why you put me in this particular packaging because it keeps being rejected. And I remember going to sleep thinking that was whatever. But I remember I woke up the next day and very clearly God said to me, "No, you're asking the wrong question. I don't make mistakes. I absolutely intended for you in your body to have the knowledge, I don't make mistakes. So ask a different question." And it was when I changed my question to what's next, because I'm clearly being kicked further into my destiny. So what's next?
Yeah, I love this. So this couple part question. So I'll use my mother as an example. Okay. And this will get to the question about you and whether that spiritual spark is something that you're born with or oftentimes people have an experience early on where that spark is acknowledged by someone close. And that's where I'm trying to get to with you. So my mother was born on the Russian-German border in 1941. Her father was a train engineer. And when the Russians came across the border, her father put her and her 5 siblings on a train and told them to go as far into Germany as you could get away from the advancing Russian army. She lived the next 5 years of her life, from 4 to 9, on that train car. No bathroom, no running water. Her sister died of starvation. And her mother looked at her and said, "The wrong daughter died. It should have been you." She's 6 years old. When my mother tells the story, she says, "I walked up into the mountains and I had to talk with God. And he told me they're all fucking crazy and he loves me." And she's had a hard life. I mean, I could go on and on, but there was that thing was in her, that connection, that belief. And she was a cleaning lady and raised 4 kids and married to an alcoholic and in this country. I mean, all like the life circumstances externally weren't quote unquote successful, but internally she's been giving her entire life. She's 85 years old. She's still inviting homeless people to live in the house. So do you think for you, you were born with that, and or was there anybody pre 5 years old or pre 7 years old that acknowledged that made it more real for you? I guess that's the question.
So yes. So yes, it is definitely part of my nature. Some of it came to how it was nurtured, but it was a girlfriend who shared with me about a year or so ago. We were having a catch-up conversation, and she was one of the few girlfriends that actually got to go home. She was one of my friends that I met in Los Angeles, but she got to travel back to the Bay Area and both meet my mother, my grandmother, and also see the community where I had come from to LA. And one thing that she noted so much about my family was that, and this I didn't remember, is she said, they depended on you for everything. And I was like, yeah, they started depending on me. And that was what I realized from the time I was a little kid. At 3 years old, my mother had moved out of my grandmother's house, she and I, with a boyfriend. And the boyfriend molested me. And my mother, being a witness to it, was afraid. She didn't know what to do. Well, the next morning, as I was saying, my pee-pee, and I could see that she was just in tears. She wasn't sure what to do. So I said, "No, we're moving. we're moving back to my grandmother's house. I'll call her and let her know, but we're moving."
And how old are you now?
3.
Wow.
And the only reason that I know that I was 3 is because when we got back to my grandmother's house, they were recruiting some kids to start preschool. And you had to be 4 to start preschool. But because I was with my grandmother was trying to get an older cousin of mine and some other cousins enrolled. I went on the tour. And when I saw the tour, I started talking and said, "Oh, I want to go." And my grandmother was telling the people that I wasn't old enough, but I talked past her. So they didn't listen to her. They're listening to me. So they enrolled me. And then a week later, they realized that I was only 3. And a week later, I also decided that I was tired. I wanted to quit. And my grandmother said, "No, you can't quit. You talked your way in. I tried to tell them that you weren't old enough. And so, you talked to it." But that was the day that they realized I was really 3. So they had to kick me out. So they came to kick me out. So she was so mad with me. She was so, my grandmother said, you done talked your way in. Then when you're ready to quit, you get a pass. She said, "All right, you're not going to school until you are 5 and you have to go. So no preschool for you." So I say that that's kind of where I realized they called me precocious, because I was just, and so I got to spend that early time with my grandmother. I think that although later, as I was advancing, it was literally because my grandmother was more afraid of, I had been like the mini me that she wanted. I was the one that cared for her. And so it was her anger and her fear. Now, I didn't understand it like I understand it now. So it was very hurtful for me at the time. But in the beginning, I was her little mini me. And so she was kind of doing an emotional tug of war where she wanted to take me from my mom, and my mother was fighting, to the best that she could to have me as her daughter. So it was just kind of these dynamics.
It's also really interesting because Jung said the most profound or impactful effect on a child is the unrealized dream of the parent.
Yes.
And so it sounds like that came from your grandmother. She had these unrealized dreams, and in fairness, because of what society was like back then, there was a lot of obstacles that you had.
But it wasn't unrealized dreams in her case. I wouldn't say that, because my grandmother she was the reason that I know that I could build a house, because we all owned real estate. She would, okay, I'm moving a wall, and a wall is moved, you know, like, so she was, like I said, she had less than a third grade education, but I was raised in a house with a good 20,000 book library plus, you know, from the time I was 3, I had a pocketbook and a notebook and a book every place I went, you know, and all of the law library, the legal code books. I was at that grandmother's house where all of this stuff was there. So she was active in community. She was an entrepreneur in her own right. And then she worked swing shift at the cannery. So she was industrious and entrepreneurial in her way. And she was definitely the leader, but she also, I think, had, as you said, but I got her. She was a model. She was a songwriter, you know, all of these things along her journey. So she is the reason that I know full life is possible. She lived into her mid 90s, you know, and she danced, she laughed, she was busy doing things. She never slowed down to the end. In fact, I think she only slowed down at the end because she had to move out of her house because my uncle passed and there was no one to live with her anymore. But she was like, she had her boyfriends, and her boyfriends were younger. You know, that's what her younger sister was chewing me out about. You know, you're supposed to have a man. What are you talking about? You don't have a man. She's like, I got a boyfriend. You know, like, like what's going on? But what it was I was very loyal. See, I was the one where, you know, family members, they didn't show up until they wanted from my grandmother. Whereas I had sowed in years of, even when I was in LA, I would come back, I would stay with her, I would clean her house. I managed her life and made it easier and made it enjoyable. And so I think with anyone, you know, her feeling was me going away, she was no longer going to be able to be my priority. And I think that's what it was more so than, you know, personal, but it all, I guess, amounts to jealousy or, you know, control, manipulation.
Well, listen, life is complicated. Relationships are complicated. There's a light and the dark and everything. But this is the next thought that occurred to me. So obviously, you're extraordinary. You're a human being who's extraordinary. And what I'm curious about is the people that don't have your qualifications, your mindset, that internal makeup. What processes, and so let me sort of back this up where I'm going with this. I'm now identifying and have been interviewing the top 1% of mostly real estate residential brokers. And what systems do they currently have in place? How are they using AI? How do they figure out what to use it? How do they figure out what the process is? So I guess the question I have for you is advice for any entrepreneur in terms of what's the most important thing January 8th, 2026? Mindset, technology, opportunities, like what should be people's game plan moving forward, utilizing these new technologies and changing their processes so they're more effective?
So I share with you my 3E framework. I have a number of frameworks. So in this framework that I use, if you will, for life, it's M plus H equal W. And so it's mindset plus health equals wealth. And so within that, what I'm saying is it all begins with mindset. Where are you going? What gives you bliss? Every day I work on my daily bliss. And that's based upon me living one of my rituals as I read A Course in Miracles. This is probably the 3rd or 4th year through the course, right? And so every morning I'm working on the course. And what the course is mindset training. And so if you want to develop your mind, and I have a bunch of other tools in that bucket of mind training and development. I don't know if you've heard of The Myth of Normal by Dr. Gabor. Again, I'm always following and consuming content around mindset, development for self, as well as how to then translate that into teachings so that I can develop others, which is why if you look at what is the legacy behind the Xenoverse and any organization that I'm creating at this point is they all have a common thread: mindset, health. Mind, body, and soul health is what I'm talking about. And that can do nothing but produce wealth.
So it starts with the mindset. And this is the interesting thing. And I find it very analogous to physical exercise. If I do nothing, I will be drawn into the darkness. It's just the nature of the mind is attracted to problems, obstacles, frustrations, news, distraction. It goes there automatically. If I don't make a conscious decision every day to, whether it's prayer, meditation, fellowship, mentoring, something. And I find it, for me, it has to happen in the morning because the morning is where the day starts.
Yeah, you set your intention for the day, but also to add to the AI. So I have a brilliant set of team, and so I love when I'm around my engineers. I'm still a closet techie, and so I still design architecture and infrastructure for projects. I also am a Lean Six Sigma black belt, so I'm always looking at process improvement across the value and supply chain. So I had two of my tech conversations yesterday, and the first one was around some of our existing SaaS and other softwares that we're integrating. And I have about a 20 list of AI tools that we're each kind of exploring in different ways and looking at how it is I want to integrate them. And that's how my mind has always worked with technology. It doesn't matter what the new technology is. I'm not a shiny object chaser, but I am curious about what's the technology. And so I usually come from wherever I am. I get down in the huddle with the early innovators and I see what it is that's talking about, who's there. I'm usually the only, one of few oddballs, if you will, at the table. I see what it is and I go, okay, this is how I'm going to apply it. And then I go back to doing what I'm doing. And I let the folks who are going to play with it and put, you guys do that. When it's where I need it to be, then I'll integrate it into what it is that I'm doing. So I had that first level conversation of, all right, it's time for us to reassess what we are using right now, because I see now some redundancies that we can begin to mitigate. My later conversation with the up and coming young, brilliant mind, and he's like, well, listen, I'm really interested in being your chief technology partner.
Yes.
And helping to develop all of the infrastructures that you want for all of the various organizations that are integrated along this pipeline. And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about, baby. Let's go, let's go. And so he's like, well, let's start with how do we update some of the administrations. And so I was so excited because this morning before our call, I was spending some time, just kind of going, oh, let me tell, I want to do this, like what are all the workflows? And so that's typically what I do is I design the architecture before I then engage the tech minds to build either the software or to integrate the softwares that need to execute on that solution. And so AI, I'm excited about.
Yeah. So here's where it gets interesting for me. And I just had this week, right? So in the interviewing of the top 1%, and I'm trying, and I kind of use it like exercise, right? Like there's so much stuff I don't want to say dumb it down is the wrong word, but let's keep it simple, right? So I identified for residential brokers, it was speed to lead. It was someone contacts your office. When are they getting contacted? How, if it doesn't happen within 45 seconds, you've already lost that battle. It's predictive analytics. It's utilizing public data and all those data points to understand out of your 10,000 people in your database, who's most likely to move in the next 3 months and how do you initiate a personalized outreach campaign to them. And then of course and this is where it's really interesting. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this. With the amount of AI slop that's about to be released in the next 12 months because of the video generation, the audio generation, and hey, because some young kid can figure out how to send out 50 Instagram reels a day, how do you keep your unique personality, your voice, your presence out there? Because at the end of the day, you want to connect with the people that love you, that respect you, that are in alignment with what Xenoverse is about. So in those kinds of, and last question about that is, well, all of a sudden I realized, there are companies that do predictive analytics, but I happen to luck out and get a CTO who's a Google guy. And I'm like, hey, can we build this instead so it's our proprietary? We don't really need them. And that is changing so quickly. That's exciting. How do you stay up with all of that?
So it's just what you said, and this is where that quiet meditation time and talking to God first, right? Because I know that God has the ultimate plan. And so all I want to do is be alignment with that and aligned with that assignment. And so it's important that I invite that guidance in every morning so that I'm acting on those things while also defining what I see. What is the big picture that I see? Remember that picture that I had as that 9-year-old little girl when I didn't even think that that was significant what I said to my mom. The only reason it became part of my journey is I was being interviewed at 22 and I had an office in Preservation Park with the San Francisco Bay Bridge out the window. And, the person asked me and it was just I was just honestly saying that was the first time I really declared something. And then it also realized for me at that point that it was time to expand. That's kind of also what has been this journey. Is it was in 2020 that I mentioned to you that I was in law school. And while I was in law school during COVID, the world was shut down. But 6 months before the world was shut down, I had moved from California to Las Vegas to build a casino. And I had done, some work in Vegas and some research and all of these things. But when I went to see where the site was located, I looked at that location and I said, there's no way that I want to. One, I don't really like casinos, but I was, tired of being sidelined as a developer. And finally, there was $3.5 billion on the table. So I was like, I can make it work. But I remember, thankfully, I turned it down. And so then I thought I had really lost my mind. And so then, fast forward, March happens, the world is being shut down. By August, I'm still thinking that, things are moving. And so we were supposed to go on a trip. A friend of mine who's also another real estate developer. Instead, our trip was interrupted and another girlfriend was on her way to Jamaica. But she was going to stay for a month. And I had never stayed in Jamaica for a month. That month trip turned into 3 months for me because she ended up having to leave me in Jamaica because I would not leave until I had to leave. And then for the next 5 years, but it was during that trip that I was talking to God on the beach, meditating. And God said, you don't have to start again rebuilding in the US. You can build your business directly from Jamaica. Because see, I was under the mindset that I got to make the money in the US so that I can then go buy and invest in the islands. But when God said, no, you can develop it straight from Jamaica, I started jumping up and down. And I remember that, oh my God. And then the billionaires that I turned down the casino, I saved them a lot, reached out to me about 7 months later and said, listen, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing, I want to invest in you because clearly, you could have took, but you saved us all, right? And I was like, well, what I'm creating, two things. One, I just finished my first year of law school, so I have 2 more years of law school to go. So you guys may not have the staying power, but I'm not going to be ready for money for a minute because I'm not dropping out of law school. I wanted to go to law school for forever. I'm finally here. I'm going to graduate. So I'll do all of the other infrastructure building. I'll do updating my research. I'll do everything that I need to do. But I won't be, asking for capital yet. I'll bootstrap it until I can graduate from law school and be in a position that I can be full-time, in this venture. And that's been the difference.
So give me your vision for Xenoverse. Who's it for? What's the outcome? How will it affect the people who live in the communities where you're building this? How will it affect ecologically? How are you structuring this so that it's whole and supportive of everybody involved?
Absolutely. And thank you. That's a very wonderful question. And that's what I'm so grateful for is while I was in the U.S., over the course of my career, I've probably trained and developed, tens of thousands of entrepreneurs over the last 40 years of my career. And the entrepreneurs who were not capable of being our clients, I did a lot of, group training and volunteer work. Even I trained for SCORE for 15 years at a time that I needed a contract for myself. But again, thieving being the concept, the government steals, intellectual capabilities, and you can't market your business. We won't even reimburse you for your expenses, but that's another conversation for another day. But I did it because it was my sowing seeds into businesses that I felt that if I could help more businesses become sustainable, then that would be satisfaction enough for me. It was kind of like my private Toastmasters. And then I ended up leading the Toastmasters group. And those, I helped them to understand better how to, develop their presentations and all of those things, through that particular platform. But Xenoverse came into being from the standpoint of I'm building a globally sustainable system of organizations. Some of the organizations, some of the stakeholders, internal stakeholders, will be groomed through my organization and incubated into opportunities and then spun off. The supply chain is being made up of these small farmers. So I created this organization called Organic Farmers Global. And this is where I am mechanizing the small farmers by doing two things. I'm creating for them a technology-based inventory system and the ability for them to participate in a marketplace by first being able to quantify their harvest, their crops. What is it that they're harvesting? What are the cycles? What are the quantities? What can we do? So I do an assessment to establish where that particular organization is. And then I put it on a path, either for incubation or acceleration. So my businesses that are under, are just getting started. In the incubation process, my goal is to get them from 0 to 5 million US gross revenues within the first 3 to 5 years. And that's about building their infrastructure and building their organizations out. And then once I get them to 5 million, then I'm able to accelerate them, because at 5 million, we have certain capital opportunities that open up for an organization. And so my goal is, when I take a business, is from 0 to 1 million is our first milestone. And so our goal is to hit that milestone within 12 to 15 months. And what that allows us to do is to see the mindsets of the teams and also recognize that who that founder may have started with may not be who is necessary to go the next level. So really, it's where we're going through sort of that snake of shedding process of shedding and really repositioning by having clear definition. So right now, I have 2 businesses that are in my Innovation Venture Labs incubation process. One is in Lagos, Nigeria. The other one is in Accra, Ghana. Ghana, we're dealing with oil, gold, and diamond mines. In Lagos, we're dealing with actually my hair. This hair is made from plantains waste. And so it's sustainable, natural product.
You think you could send some of that my way?
I can send some of it your way, and guess what? It's not cancer causing. And so that's the other big, problem, is that women wearing all of these extensions, all these chemicals, are leading to cancers and health issues. So back to the big vision. My big play, the big living hypothesis that I'm using, is that full life is 120 years and beyond. And if you're not living 120 years and beyond, what then are the impediments to that? They begin with either your mind, your body, or your soul. Your mind needs to be detoxed. It's your beliefs that need to be addressed. You need to address your mindset, right? We address those beliefs, we get to a better mindset. Your body, if we detox the sugar from your body, the health outcomes are tremendous. So you'll get your body back. And your soul, the same thing. Once we clear up those other 2 areas, trust me, your soul will be reconnected to God's direction. You will begin to find your way in alignment, not only by yourself, but with a community of others who are aligned. And so kind of where you talked about, you asked me about those nurturing environments. Look, I'm not going to pretend that there haven't been angels, because I've acknowledged, in fact, I have a book that I've been working on calling The Magnificence of Mentorship, where I'm paying homage to everyone that contributed anything positively to my journey. And the sad thing is that that's an easy book to write, because unfortunately, that list, considering the amount of people whose paths I cross, that list is relatively short. So I can write that book and pay proper homage to all of them, and, and not bore anyone in the process, which is a little bit sad, but that's just the reality of things. But I count it all. Even those who said no or did things that whatever, because they were necessary too, because God wanted to keep me on the path so that I could get to this particular point and know with confidence that if you face death, if you face divorce, if you face disaster, if you face disappointments, and if you feel like there's nothing else, I can tell you, yes, there is. And not only, yes, there is something else, I have a methodology. First of all, let us come and hug you and embrace you. Let us love on you. Let us help you heal. Let us help you heal from the emotional trauma and hurt first. Let's start there. And once we take care of that emotional trauma and healing, then everything else becomes a possibility. And it's not us forcing it on you, it's you being free to see it and experience it for yourself. So my big vision is to create places and spaces where people can heal mind, body, and soul. And whether that is expressed through my resorts, whether that's later expressed through some of my high-end, multifamily, community development projects, physical, real estate development projects. I love real estate. I have commercial projects in my pipeline. But more importantly, that is reflected in the companies that I lead, that I coach the CEOs in how to not only develop themselves, but how to develop their teams. And so in my organization, my leadership team, they are required to have a coach and to be a coach. Mm-hmm. Because I live every day from the mindset of there's more to learn than I have possibly learned. And every day I can learn something new. But also it's important for me to share and teach and guide the next person along their journey, to share some of the things without projecting. I don't need to project me onto you to guide you. I can pull me out of that calculation and help you be able to evaluate the key things that are necessary for you, because we all have blind spots. And this is the thing, is that those of us that have blind spots, that hunger for that mentorship, that's the tragedy, is where you have people who have their own insecurities and they can't see you because they're so consumed with their projection of themselves on you. Those were the things that I had to learn. That's why I had to develop the discernment. So I had to learn through those experiences that weren't the best. But guess what? I count them all joy. I count them all bliss, because I would not have been able to develop the muscles that I have had I not endured. In the gym, you want to walk out with tone, body. You got to go in there and lift some weights, and you can't lift the same ones every day. You got to be sore for a while.
And right, and the more it hurts, the stronger you got.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, I absolutely love this. I want to end with just something fun. So right now, well, there's three parts to the question. When was your aha moment with artificial intelligence? In other words, what was the first moment where you did something where you just went, oh my God, this stuff is unbelievable? So let's start with that question. Do you remember it?
So we first started kind of playing with ChatGTP in some way. I think that may have been the first one that I was playing with, was ChatGTP. Right. And when I realized that I could give it, because I'm a great writer, and now again, coming out of law school, I was really interested in contracts and stuff. So I, putting together the legal contracts and the strategies and all of that stuff. But when I realized that working lean and mean without having all of the resource tools that I normally have. That's a lot of times why I would moonlight as an adjunct professor, is because a lot of those subscriptions that we'd have to invest in, I could get access to as a professor. So I'm looking for a professorship job right now so I could get, in the databases, right? But I realized that I could input my strategies and I could frame the questions, and that the responses to helping to gather some of that stuff was getting better and better and better. And so that's when I said, I'm dangerous now, because in a second I will be able to, go much further, much deeper, because, I have this reality of I've got this storage full of my library in Vegas that I've been trying to get here to Jamaica. I need like a 40-foot container to get everything shipped here. And so in the meantime, it's like, how do you create? It's like I have everything. I've been saving and putting together. It's organized, but I need it. I don't have it here, And so ChatGTP just kind of helped me get at least enough of the, next level of stuff. So that's what I said. Yes.
Yeah, and it's funny. My aha moment was I got in the car with my 18-year-old, and he was going through something. At the time, I was in a relationship, and the woman I was with had reached out to him outside of us, and was whatever. It was a complicated personal situation, and it was one of those moments where I went, I don't really know how to answer this. And so we asked ChatGPT, this is the situation. I'm here with my 18-year-old son, and it came back with the most emotionally and spiritually clean and intelligent. It was the kind of thing where I went, wow, that's what I wished I could articulate. And I went, man, this is something else. So, and that was probably, 2-3 years ago. All right. Second part of the question. Currently, right now, what 3 workflows or what 3 daily uses are you using AI for that have really bought you back some time and brought you some joy?
Oh, it brings me joy always to be able to maximize my time. So I've been using ChatGTP, as I mentioned. I've been using DeepSeek. I've used Perplexity. I'm using Notebook LLM. I just started on that. And then I have a Revoicer that I just had recently purchased. I haven't had a chance to get started on that. And then I even bought an AI-influenced YouTube channel management platform that I'm going through. And then I have Claude. I have, I have a list of at least 20 to 25 that I'm kind of toying with. We use Go High Level as our baseline for our CRM, and it allows a lot of flexibility in terms of the design and architecture. And my team is really advanced, and so they had been already incorporating AI in different ways and voices. I mean, we have AI. We could do just about everything that we need to do with AI bots. We've been testing bots. We've been doing all kinds of things. So, yeah, yeah.
So then I'll a second part to that question. So in terms of your daily workflow, like what are the things that you're doing daily with AI that have become just a part of your day that saves you time?
So all of my contracts and letters now, I don't spend all of the time that I used to spend perfecting them. I'm able to stay at a very high level and identify these are the key points of what it is that I want this communication to entail. Here are the facts that I want to be incorporated in this communication, and this is the intent for this communication. So go ahead and, I'll sometimes feed it into 2 to 3 different platforms and see which one gives me the best response. Chat, because I've been working with it probably the longest, tends to first time out get it, but sometimes there's times that I'm looking for certain research data that I may find DeepSeek to be, or Perplexity to be, a little bit better at giving me some additional resources that I want to consider. But then also, because I'm a quick back of the napkin, for me, everything has to be quantified. So before I even explore a business activity, before I spend and invest my time on any type of business strategy or any kind of business engagement, I first back into what's a back of the napkin set of assumptions that I have about this business, the market opportunity, the strengths and weaknesses of this particular team or this particular situation, and what are the opportunities and threats. So a quick SWOT analysis with some numbers. Here's a quick, dark and dirty, my set of demographics, assumptions, or whatever. Give me a 3-year forecast. Because
Well,
I've done it I'm doing it by hand with my calculator.
right, exactly. Well, this is what's fun. I'll just throw this out there. I was a ChatGPT guy. I still have this, but then I realized Gemini for me now has access, because I'm in the Google workspace, all my emails, all my documents, all my notebooks. I was just talking to my guy this morning. I said, listen, what I want to do is I want to have at the end of the week, every email I sent out, every conversation I had, every transcript, I want you to look at the pattern of the week. What are the 3 most important activities that I need to do next week based on these conversations that I've been having? Where have I been weak? Where could I get stronger? Where am I wasting time? And so Gemini is able to basically go in and has access to the entire suite of Google stuff. So to your point, I mean, that's what I love about it is what's the actionable intelligence? Because I'm sure, like me and you've got a lot of balls in the air. And it's really identifying where to put your attention. So I love that. The last part of the question is looking forward. What are you most excited by about the possibility of growing Xenoverse and how AI is going to be able to help that happen?
Oh my gosh. So I love this because when I was looking up even how to categorize the experience, the customer experience that we're creating, I thought we were, typical 4-star, 5-star resort. But according to my research, we would be considered what's called a 7-star resort because of the whole process, our client experience. And AI allows me to facilitate that in ways. In fact, it's so funny. I was in the shower and I was naming my AI bot that when you go to the Xenoverse website would greet you, right? And I was kind of saying what she would say to you when you land there, because the first thing that I want her to do is to quickly allow you to experience us immediately how you prefer to experience us. So if you're there to get more research and you want to do the research yourself by going through kind of some of the videos or whatever that's there, that's fine. But if you want to speak to a live person right away, I don't want it to be, 10 seconds before you're connected from her to that live person who then begins to bring you into our experience. And so what AI will allow our teammate to do is to be able to have the data that they need about all of the information. They don't have to go hunting and searching for that information. Therefore, they can do the things that AI can't yet do. And that is bringing forward, they have to drink the Kool-Aid, right? So to me, if I'm an effective leader, I'm able to enroll stakeholders throughout my value chain and supply chain as those who believe what I believe. Therefore, in their belief of what I believe, they understand the value that they contribute to making that belief manifest, right? So we're all in this together. We're all drinking the Kool-Aid together.
But I
so that
love
we can.
this. Because Stephanie, I just had this vision, right? The old way was we all show up at the Hilton and the Hilton says, hey, we're going to give people a warm towel in the lobby and we're going to do it. So we're all having the same experience. The new way is personalized predictive analytics about this individual person, that what they love, what they want to do first is get to the beach and put their feet in the water. They don't care about learning anything. They just want, and there are other people, and this is what's interesting for my generation, there are other people who don't actually want to talk to people. They want to have an experience where maybe they're shy, maybe they're introverted, maybe they've had, who knows? They want it to be curated to their specific way. And what I hear you say, it's going to take a little while to get there. But what you're excited about is to be able to curate experiences that speak authentically to that person and give them exactly what they want and need in that moment, utilizing artificial intelligence.
Yes, that's how. Yeah. So I have more, throughout the process, but it's just, being able to have that ultimate in terms of high touch, personalized, for our 120 Club VIP. So we have this 120 Club. So when I imagined each of these brands are probably, similar with improvements on US brands. So I didn't just pull them out of the hat. I really looked at where I saw something that did a good job, but I thought we could do a better job, you know? And so the baseline that I looked at for the 120 Club was I started with AARP, which is a outstanding organization. Phenomenal organization. I felt like they must work for the CIA because they're the only folks that no matter where I moved, they ended up with the right address. I'm like, these guys are better than anybody. The U.S. Postal Service need to ask them how to get my mail to me because their mail finds me no matter what, right? But I had an opportunity to go to one of their conventions. SCORE asked me to represent them at a couple of their conventions. And oh my goodness, when I hung out in Los Angeles with the AARP folks, it was like over and done. And that was, about 10 years back. And so again, at that time, I wasn't thinking about the significance of that. Now, when I talk about my 120 Club, it's like it's AARP meets your, most prestigious country club membership meets your most prestigious, spa and wellness experience. And it's all of that, right? And so it's a lifestyle that's based upon when I start talking about the brands that occupy the space, the yacht manufacturers, the Rolls Royce, I know who my audience is, and I know what it is they're interested in and what it is that they need, right? And so I understand that for them, their performance, Warren Buffett finally, sort of passed the mantle, but many entrepreneurs want to continue as long as they can because they have capacity and they have something to contribute to their organization. So if they have mental faculties, if they're physically well and all of those things. So we're saying, hey, we're going to reset you and give you an opportunity. And guess what? If you still want to be retired out on your yacht, fine, more power to you. But if you want community, if you want thought leadership, if you want to my dark chocolate, Naked with Dr. Money on Tour, Dark Chocolate Conversations. My Dark Chocolate Conversations is my version of a TED Talk, but it's a TED Talk over dinner that at the dessert place, we're serving you sipping chocolate. Well, I'm not just serving you sipping chocolate just because, that is cute and catchy, but it's because I know that if you drink the particular sipping chocolate that I'm serving you, that it's going to help your veins and it's going to basically add to mitigating sugar, diabetes, and so I'm healing you. Right. I'm healing your mind and your body and hopefully your soul around everything that I'm doing. So everything that we have, every program that we introduce is carefully curated from a perspective of we've studied the blue zones. We know that there's evidence of people living full lives. So this isn't something I just made up. The actuaries have updated the insurance policies to go to 120 years. So come on.
I love Stephanie. I feel like we could talk all day. We could go another hour and a half. I absolutely adore talking to you. And it's interesting. It is the miracle of AI. That's how the miracle of AI and God, because that's how we ended up connecting, and I couldn't be more grateful for the conversation, for your time, for your graciousness, your enthusiasm, your perseverance. I absolutely adore talking to you, and I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for making it happen again. And I'm sure we'll be talking after this. And I just want to end by saying thank you so much for watching Real Estate Rewired with Gus Waite, AI with a Heart. If you're interested in being on the show, please reach out to me. I hope you got something out of this. Stephanie, you're going to hold on for a minute because I want to talk to you. And how can people get in touch with you?
Xenoverse wellnessgroup.com. Zenoverse wellnessgroup.com. And thank you guys so much for having me. It's truly my pleasure.
Thank you. If you've got value from today's episode, hit subscribe, leave a comment. I'd love to know what you're thinking. If you're ready to turn what you love into your superpower and take what you hate off your plate, schedule your free AI discovery call. The link is in the description and pinned comment. I'm Gus Waite. Until next time.